In the last video, we used t-test to compare two different groups. Particularly, we're interested in finding out whether or not there were significant differences between those two groups. But what if you find yourself in a situation where you're comparing for more than two groups? What if you're comparing income across racial groups? That is certainly more than two groups. Well, in those situations, you cannot use a t-test because t-test can only be used for the comparison of two groups. In those situations, you will use an Anova. For this example, we are going to use the states dataset, which contains the average salary paid to teachers across different states and regions. Specifically, we're going to be comparing 4 regions of the United States: the Northeast, the Midwest, the South, and the West, across the average salary paid to public school teachers. Again, before we go to SPSS and start clicking away, we need to establish our hypotheses. The null hypothesis is always going to say that there is no difference between any of the groups. In our case, that translates to there are no difference in average teacher salaries between U.S. regions. Conversely, the alternative hypothesis is always going to say that at least one of the regions will be significantly different from the other. At least one of the groups will be significantly different from the others. So that translates to our case, at least one of the regions will have a different average teacher salary. Step 2 is running the test. And to run the test, we are going to go to Analyze, Compare Means, and for the purposes of this class, there are different types of ANOVAs, but for the purposes of this class, we're always going to be using a one-way ANOVA. As you can see, the dependent variable is always going to be the variable that you are comparing, right? In this case, the dependent variable is going to be the average annual salary for public school teachers. The factor in this case is going to be the grouping variable. The grouping variable in this case is going to be the regions. You can it's useful to click on options and ask for the descriptives, and always click on post hoc and click on LSD, assuming that it will allow me to do that. So we run the analysis, and we have a couple of tables here. So let's just go over the tables. And I'm going to use my slides to do that. The first table shows you the descriptive statistics between each of the groups. So the Northeast is composed of 9 states, and the average teacher salary is $48,000. The Midwest is composed of 12 states, and the average teacher salary is $41,000. Same for the South, which is consists of 17 states, and the West, which is composed of 13 states. The average teacher salary is $42,000. From these descriptive statistics, you can kind of make guesses as to what you're going to find. From this perspective, from these numbers, from these results, you see that the Northeast, teachers in the Northeast make a lot more money, about $7,000 roughly more money than on average than teachers from the Midwest, the South, and the West. So if I had to guess, I would probably say that teachers from the Northeast are going to make significantly more money than teachers from other regions. However, when you look at teachers from the Midwest, South, and the West, their salaries, they don't really differ all that much. They're all about $41,000. So I wouldn't expect them to be significantly different from each other. Again, this is all speculation because that's why we run the test, to make sure whether or not there's a significant difference. So when you run the test, Anova is really called the F test. And so when you look at the table, there are 2 numbers that are really going to matter for the purposes of this class. The F value, the F ratio, which simply represents the magnitude of the difference between the groups. The bigger the differences between the groups, the bigger the F ratio. And of course, the significance here is the p-value. In this case, the p-value is equal to 0.031. That means that there's a 3.1 chance that the difference in wages among the regions is a result of random chance. This is below our threshold of 0.05, which means that we reject the null hypothesis, right? So if we go back to this slide, we reject the null hypothesis that there's no difference in average teacher salary among the regions. And we have to accept the alternative hypothesis that at least one of the regions is significantly different. So the F test or Anova really is an omnibus test. It tells you that at least one of the groups is significantly different from the other. But the other question, if there is a significant difference from at least one of the groups, the only question that you want to answer is, well, which groups are significantly different from each other, right? This is why we use the post-hoc test, particularly the LSD. And so when you get the LSD, I really couldn't click it here, but when you get the LSD, it looks something like this, right? And essentially, the LSD is comparing each region. So the Northeast here is compared to the Midwest, and the difference in salaries, in the average salary, is about $6,700. Right? So teachers in the Northeast make about $6,700 more than teachers in the Midwest, and that difference is statistically significant because this p-value here is less than 0.05. Again, also if you can see the star there, that means that the difference is statistically significant. When comparing to the South, teachers in the Northeast make about $7,100 more than teachers in the South, and that difference is again statistically significant. Teachers in the Northeast make about $5,700 more than teachers in the West, and that difference is statistically significant because this p-value is less than 0.05. Again, this is the kind of stuff that we already kind of saw here, so this makes sense. However, when you look at the Midwest is not significantly different from teachers in the South. Teachers in the Midwest do not earn significantly more or less money than teachers from the West. The same from the South and Midwest, and the South and the West, and the West and the Midwest, the West and the South, right? So essentially what we saw here is that the only region that makes significantly more money than the other is the Northeast, and the regions in the Midwest, South, and West do not differ significantly from each other. So how would you report this? Because pasting the table would not be reporting. Pasting the table is just pasting the table. So the way you would report this is that first you would say that there is a statistically significant difference in the average annual teacher salaries between at least two of the U.S. regions. And you will give me the F ratio and whether or not the p-value is greater or less than 0.05. In this case, the p-value is less than 0.05. Both things need to be there for you to report it. The statistics, but also this language. Next, you will tell me that based on the post-hoc test, it shows that teachers in the Northeast earn significantly higher salaries than all other regions in the U.S. However, teachers in the Midwest, South, and the West do not earn significantly different salaries from each other.